And we are live. I'm with Mixerman. It's Eric Sarafin. Wait, am I saying the name right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. He has several books out. I bought ZEN and the Art of Producing, which an artist has and has never given it back. Never get your books back. Eric would, let's see, it's mixerman.net. So guys, look up Mixerman. Go to mixerman.net. Check out his discography. Eric would, let's see, it's Mixerman. Okay, somebody has the Google Hangout open. Is that you, Eric?
That's me. That's me. It's me. Hold on.
Yeah, if you have YouTube, open, we'll get a yeah. Okay.
There you go.
So you have the womb is the womb still open and active?
Yeah, it's kicking. I've kind of moved over to Facebook, you know. I mean, that's where all the kids are, and that's where they seem to want to hang out. So, you know, forums are they're dying basically because of Facebook, really, and Google and all these social sites that allow for all this stuff, you know. Now,
in our group, Pensado students, any and everybody gets to chime in and whatever, and it's not too brutal. I like that in your group. If I were to come in there saying something that's just total crap, you guys would just slay me. I like that concept of your group.
It's not as brutal as it used to be. You know, I mean, man, back in like the early aughts when it was the Rec Pit, when we were on the Rec Pit, that was the first forum. It was brutal, man. There were beatdowns, verbal beatdowns on people, and now it's so much kinder and gentler. It's hilarious. But we do try and keep the truth available, you know. I mean, there's just a lot of misinformation out there on the internet, and you know, I don't know how somebody who knows nothing like differentiates between the truth and just some of these people who go on who've been engineering or recording or mixing or any of it for all of, you know, a year and are giving advice. I think it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a generational thing, I think. Like I'm a Gen Xer, and for my generation, you didn't really want people to see your mistakes and stuff and see your growth and you know, the progression. And this generation is, because of reality TV, probably is so comfortable with putting themselves out there and not caring whether they look like an idiot or not, or whether they're going to have a completely different opinion in a year or 2 years or whatever. And I guess to some degree, you know, it's the same. It's just that they're a little, I mean, look, I put The Daily Adventures of Mixerman, which was the first book that I wrote, online, live. It was basically a first draft of it. So, I mean, I did it too, but it just seems like this generation is just a little more shameless about it. Like, they don't care. They'll let you watch them, like, taking their first baby steps and give you advice on it. And I can't wrap my head around it, but it's so prevalent that you got to just think that that's just a generational thing. And you know, in some ways I do get it. Like I said, I did put up the Daily Adventures. I just don't get it quite to the extent that it's gotten. Like, there's a lot of people putting out information that's just downright pretty much wrong. I don't care, you know. People will say, you know, you grew up with analog. Well, that's not exactly true. I kind of grew up, my whole career has been the path of digital, you know, from the beginning. When DATs came out, and then ADATs, and then the first DAW I used was in 1992 to record The Far Side. So, you know, as much as I was an analog guy for all those years, at the end of the day, it's all been just one long progression into the digital world for my whole career. And I mean, it's to the point where the only analog gear I use is on my tubas, pretty much, and that's it. Unless I'm recording, of course, but for mixing, that's it. I just use the computer now. The plugins seem to work, do what I need them to do. It's easier. I can do recalls. I'm dealing with people that thousands of miles away a lot of times, and I have to be able to send them revisions in which the mix is identical, and I can't have all this analog gear in the chain that I'm documenting and putting in there. So, you know, that's just the way it is. Sorry, I'm like taking this journey. My apologies. I sometimes talk a stream of consciousness. It might be like
exactly
a
what we want.
thing, because Trump does that shit too.
But no, that's exactly what we want. Now you said the Far Side was done on a DAW. Which DAW?
It was a Spectral Sonics. I don't even know if I think they're still around, that company, but I don't think they're doing DAWs. But they had. This was my introduction into it. Like, I knew about Sound Tools, but I had never used it, which was the precursor to Pro Tools, of course. Logic was probably around then, but you know, this one had had designated converters, and basically I just kind of had to learn how to use it, and I recorded the Far Side on it. Basically everything was in the MPC 60, right? So it was just a transfer for as far as the tracks were concerned. But then we recorded all the vocals into it, and then we transferred it to 2-inch and mixed off the 2-inch, which was really kind of totally unnecessary. I mean, I realized, you know, some years later that once you go digital, there's really no reason to transfer it to analog. All the benefits that you were getting from the analog tape, hitting the analog tape, really was gotten if you hit it first. And if you put it digital, digital's already read the transients the way it read it, especially back then, and there was really no point in putting it on 2-inch. But that's what we did, and we'd record up in this little tiny production room, and we would mix downstairs in the Neve VR room, and there were various mixers on that at the time. This was my first album, so I pretty much recorded it. I mixed a couple of the songs. I mixed Other Fish. I mixed She Keeps Passing Me By, along with five of us mixed She Keeps Passing Me By. And really, honestly, I have no idea whose mix is now. This is made the record. It's really, it could have been any of us, really. I have a feeling it was the one that Jay Swift did on the MCI, because you can hear on the mutes it goes anytime there's a drop, and so that was there was an old console, an old MCI console in the production room, and when you hit the mutes, they were dirty, and so consequently those ended up on the record, which is, you know, it was flavor. That's just how it was back then. That's what we did.
Did you actually buy that, or was that at somebody's studio? Some studio?
No, that was at Hollywood Sound. What happened was Mike had signed the Far Side to do an EP before they did their album, and he did the EP. What did they do? Soulflower, and I think Oh Shit. But so those two songs were being mixed, and they were coming back and doing revisions and stuff, and I was assisting. Joe Primo was mixing it, and Mike was there all the time, and I'd just be in the back of the room talking, chatting with him and stuff. Mike Ross, who owned Delicious Vinyl. And, you know, he was saying to me, yeah, I'm going to do the whole album, but I'm not looking forward to working at Paramount this whole time, which was a studio back then. Shit. It was just a shit fucking studio. Just shit people worked there. It was just, it sucked. And they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And so I'm like, you know, I was a year into LA, maybe less, and I had spent a lot of years recording in Boston already, so I had chops. I came to Los Angeles with some chops. I was green, but I wasn't like unfamiliar. You know, I knew what I was doing to some extent. So I said to him, I said, dude, there's this room upstairs. Jesse just wants to put people up there. It's just a production room, but if they're only doing vocals, that's fine. So, you know, I told him I've been recording for years. You know, every time you come in here, you complain about how shitty everything sounds from Paramount. Well, why don't you work with me here? It's the same price, right? And he said, it's the same price. So he's like, all right, let's do it. So the next day, the Far Side's upstairs with me, and I tell this story in my new book, actually. And so I set up a U47, Neumann U47, and they decide that they want to hold the mic. I'm like, guys, you don't hold a U47. No, we gotta hold the mic. Well, you know, this is my first gig, my first day with them. I don't want to be like clamping them down, their creativity. So I'm like, all right, well, this is just going to be a shit show. So at least I'll record them, and then they'll hear it, and they'll realize, oh, we can't hold the mic. Because it's just, you know, it's a U47. They're large diaphragm condensers. They're very sensitive, and you can't, they're supposed to be in a cage in front of you. You're not supposed to hold them. And so they recorded it, and they didn't mind it at all. And so at the end of the day, I'm like, really? You guys don't mind all that noise? Oh, it's all good. I'm like, okay. So I sent the daily to Mike, fully expecting to say, what the fuck's going on? He comes the next day. He's like, dude, it's not working out. I'm like, whoa, no. Whoa, hold on a second. No, it's not working out because these guys held the U47. He's like, what? You don't hold a U47? I'm like, I know you don't hold a U47, but, you know, these guys, they don't know that, and they're not listening to me, and, you know, I figured they'd hear it, and it'd be fine. They'd say, oh, no, we can't hold the U47, and that wasn't the case. And so Mike's like, oh, he was relieved. And then the band comes in, and he's like, guys, you don't hold the U47, and do what he says. And so that was the beginning. That was the start. And so every night for 4 hours for 8 months, they would come in, and I would record their vocals, basically. And then sometimes we'd go downstairs and do some production stuff, and sometimes we'd go to other rooms. Like all the interludes on that album were done in the API room down the street. That the band was Grand Funk Underground Railroad was the band, and so we recorded that stuff there, and then and that's pretty much it. But yeah, I mean, I was in the right place at the right time for that gig, and you know, I still get gigs from that album. I mean, it's crazy. You do an album, and 25 years later, people are still hiring you because of that album. And I don't think kids are going to have those kinds of opportunities. Not this generation, just because of how fucked up everything is right now. I mean, I would not want to be trying to build a discography in this day and age. First of all, the songwriter-producer is king right now. So unless you're a songwriter, you're not going to get any pop albums. I'm not finding a whole lot of rock albums that are on majors. That's all indie. Rock is pretty much dead at the moment. You know, and there's people that are going to listen and say, no, rock's not dead, I got a rock band. No, I'm sorry, but if nobody's signing rock, it's dead, okay? If there's no albums that are like blowing up that are rock, it's dead. This happens. Just like after the 80s, program music was dead for the longest time. Became, you know, hip-hop, and then rock music was king, grunge. Grunge was king in the early 90s. And then organic music, and then you had the bands that couldn't play in the aughts, that you had that you snapped to grid. And so these things, they come in and out of favor, and you kind of got to go where the work is, regardless of what you like. So, you know, I like doing rock records, but I love doing program music just as much, and now that's in vogue again. And you know, that's actually my roots. That's where I started. Was with MIDI when it was first coming out in the 80s, and with a 4-track recorder and programming the stuff, and you know, so everything comes back full circle.
Okay, now the Billionheir Apparent.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So the big long-term plan for me is, I figure there's going to be a day where people don't want to hire me as a producer anymore, right? So in preparation for that day, I've been writing, and I've been developing my writing career and my writing chops, really. You know, a on a whim, I wrote the first book, The Daily Adventures of Mixerman, which was a satire. It was very popular. There were 150,000 people coming every day to read that story by the end of it. And so I was instantly semi-well known within this industry as Mixerman, even though I was still anonymous at the time. Semi-anonymous, because the moment you tell one person, and there was one person that knew right from the beginning, it's only a matter of time. In '08, I finally just released that I'm my real name. So after the satire, I decided, well, I'd like to write some books on mixing and recording and producing, and I don't want them to be like every other book that's out there. Like, I have no interest in trying to tell someone how to use a compressor. First of all, I don't know that I can tell you how to use a compressor except turn the fucking knobs until it sounds good, I mean, eventually you kind of figure some shit out. Oh, if I turn the attack to as fast as possible, it immediately grabs whatever it's doing, and it distorts too. Oh, but if I pop it just a little less than as fast as it can, then it reacts differently. So, I mean, to me, it's a matter of moving the knobs and listening and making mistakes, and eventually you figure this stuff out. So I didn't want to I don't even mention how to set a compressor, because it doesn't matter. We know that a compressor is used for a number of things. We know it's used to color tone, and we know it's used to control dynamic range. I'm sure I mentioned that in my books. So beyond that, what do you need to know? We all know what an EQ does. What's the most important thing is to understand what the frequencies do, and to understand why, when you're listening to a new part that's being added, why is it not working? Well, a lot of times it's because of the part, but sometimes it's because it's in the same frequency range as everything else. I mean, I just did this the other day with BJ Liederman. He was here, and he wanted to lay a Rhodes on this track that's pretty much done as far as I'm concerned. And so he's laying down this Rhodes part. I'm like, I don't even know how I make this thing fit, BJ, because it's just right in there with the low end of the piano and the low end of the bass and the low end, and it's like, I got nothing. How am I supposed to make this fit? And so that's where frequency comes into play. I mean, Beethoven didn't have EQ. If he needed more bass, he needed more bass players. You know what I mean? And that's how he got more amplitude. And he had some signs. He could say, okay, bass players, you play loud here. Okay, so that's how he got more bass. So I wanted to talk about those things, about the musical decisions, about how you think about the music, and as it relates to sound. Because sound and music are one and the same. Music is sound. It's just organized sound. And so many people in this business want to separate the two. You can't separate music and sound. You tell me, does that sound good? Give me context. Give me relativity. Give me something that, how am I supposed to tell you whether something sounds good? It's too arbitrary. I can tell you whether a guitar sounds good in a track. I can tell you whether a guitar tone sounds good with that production or makes sense with a production. But I can't just listen to something and say, that's a great guitar tone. Because it could be the worst guitar tone on the planet, but be the best guitar tone for a particular production. Okay, so we can't judge sound that way. We have to judge sound based on the music. And so I wrote these 3 books, mixing, producing, and recording, with all of that in mind. Recording has the most technical information just because we have to deal with microphones and mic pre's, and you have to understand certain things. And, but even that, I try and keep it to whether you want to, do you want a ribbon? Do you want an LDC, an SDC, or a dynamic? And to think about it along those terms rather than the specific microphones. Then once you determine what it is that you think is going to work best, then start thinking about the specific microphones. Anyway, so I wrote those 3 books. I did a whole shitload of videos too that are in those 3 books. And then I decided, okay, I've done my recording, producing, and mixing book, and I want to go back to satire. And I want to do something a little bit broader. for a broader audience, because the Daily Adventures of Mixerman is really, written for people who have an interest in being in the studio and have some modicum of knowledge of it. Hashtag Mixerman and the Billionheir Parent is about the business, and about the business today, and about how there's so little opportunity for today's young producers because the money is being siphoned off by large corporations that deliver everything. Whether it's the cable companies, Comcast, Verizon, whether it's AT&T or Google with YouTube, or Spotify, or Pandora, or Vimeo, or Tidal now, or Apple. They're all making lots and lots and lots of money. I saw an article, Sony made $25 billion on streaming. Where's the money? We're not getting any of the money. I'm not getting any of the money. All my royalties are just about dried up. I was going to retire on my royalties. That ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen because of what's happened. And so they're all making the money, and we're getting nothing. And the reason that we're getting nothing is because radio is required to pay songwriters every time they spin a record. And how they do that is there's PROs, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. That stands for Performance Rights Organizations. And so they monitor radio, and they figure out what tracks are getting played the most, and they collect monies from every bar, every radio station, every place where there's public performances of songs. They monitor them, they tally up how much the tracks are getting played, and they pay out to the publishers. Now radio, if they didn't have to, if they weren't by law told that they have to pay a statutory rate, they wouldn't. So why do we think that streaming sites are going to all of a sudden start paying fair? You got Apple coming out and saying, well, we're going to pay more than everybody, and they notch it up like a 0.00095 from somebody else. Who gives a flying fuck? We're not even close to what you guys should be paying. I mean, they should be paying a nickel, and it should be going to both the artist and the songwriter. Same with radio. Radio should be paying the artist and the songwriter now. And there's only one way that these things are going to happen, and that's if Congress gets involved. Just like when Congress wrote Title 17, which has the statutory payments for radio in there, and has all of everything on how we get paid these days, and this has been updated since then, but not sufficiently. And streaming sites have been around since 2006, and it's now 2016, and they're making lots and lots of money. In fact, they take 30% right off the top. So Spotify collects all this money for people who give them $10 or for advertising or whatever, and they take that money and they say, okay, well, we got X amount. We're going to take 30% for ourselves. We'll pay out a huge chunk of money to the majors, because the majors, we don't keep the majors happy. We got nothing. What are we going to just play independent music? No, we need the majors' catalog. They've got 70 years of catalog. We need their catalog. So this huge chunk of the money goes to the majors, who are now invested in the streaming sites for good reason, and the rest, this little tiny whatever, which is an amoeba because it really depends on how much money comes in, gets dispersed amongst all the independent artists out there. So it doesn't add up to anything. And no one can figure out how or who's getting paid what. You read on the internet, you cannot find anything where anybody has any kind of agreement. Well, I got this. One guy is telling me, oh, I get ½ cent per spin. Bullshit. maybe on 1,000 spins, on the first 1,000. Who knows? That's what I'm saying. It's impossible to track how these guys are paying because it changes. So I was so frustrated with the way things are, and I think that everybody's so frustrated and this is not a subject that hasn't been getting attention. I mean, it has. Taylor Swift boycotted Spotify. Adele said, "Fuck it, I'll just sell my CD." And then everybody's like, "See, you could still sell CDs." No, you can't look at the anomaly and say that's the rule. Very few people can go and sell CDs like that. So I think the #1 song sells like 27,000 units right now. 27,000 puts you at #1 for the week. That's absurd. It used to be hundreds of thousands, not 27,000. So I decided that I wanted to write this book, #Mixerman, the Billionaire Parent, about the current state of the music industry. And the concept was, the premise is basically, I get Mixerman as the character, gets a call from an Indian billionaire who wants Mixerman to mentor his son to become the next big Bollywood producer. Well, Mixerman, I'm going to talk in the third person now because Mixerman's a character in the book. Okay, Mixerman doesn't really take interns, and then he gets offered so much money, like his yearly nut, that he's like, all right, well, I might as well do it. And so the kid comes, and he realizes that this kid isn't going to be a producer. I mean, if you take $1 billion in cash and you put it in a bank account and you get about 3.1% or something like that interest, which is very low interest, but that's pretty much what you get right now, right? Probably you should get more on $1 billion, you would think, but that's $31 million a year in interest. That's $1 every second. So how is it that you're going to charge, let's say, $15,000 to produce an album when you're making $1 a second? It just doesn't make any sense. So Mixerman decides that young Kanish, his billionaire, isn't going to be a producer. He's music mogul material. With $1 billion, if he could just get one of his dad's $42 billion, he would be in a position to be a major player in the music business. That's how small the music business is. That's why nothing gets done for the music business and why big tech can just steamroll us, because they have all the money, they've got all the lobbyists. Congress has no interest in dealing with the music business because we don't have a lobby that's strong enough to do anything, to institute change. And we're deadlocked on top of that, you know? They're not doing anything. So until that fever breaks and until Congress gets in there and starts to do something about this and starts to say, okay, we need to come up with fair payments to protect songwriters and artists so that they can get paid fairly for their work and not taken advantage of by these big tech companies who don't think they should have to pay anything. Because if you don't put something up on there, someone else will. And so there's no collective bargaining. There's no way for us to make any changes. They're just playing or tinkering around on the edges with little, you know, with small percentages of pennies that is never going to develop a middle class in this business again. The internet is never going to be what it was supposed to be, which is this entity that makes distribution a thing of the past, where people can distribute themselves. Well, all of that's possible, but not if there's not a structure for people to get paid. And so this satire is really all about that. It does get wacky, it gets pretty funny, and you know, I'm making commentary throughout, as I do in my books, and I think it's and I did an audiobook for it as well, which is full of music. And you can go on YouTube. I think you put the link on the thing and check those out. And that's pretty much it with Billionaire.
I was listening to the Billionaire Parent this morning, and a 19-year-old who knows nothing about audio was laughing his butt off because you kept saying fuck, and in other words, he was like, "Are you kidding me?" And he was sitting there. You had him captivated by how you were basically talking crazy.
Is this
As
your
he,
19-year-old?
huh?
Is this your 19-year-old?
No,
Oh,
no, a friend of mine's.
I was gonna
But he
say,
was sitting there laughing his butt off um,
cool.
at how you at how you were talking, and what I actually like about what you're doing on these audiobooks is like when I post stuff on Facebook, when people see me in the studio doing some of the inappropriate, crazy things that I'm doing with artists, they get the feeling of seeing what's behind the veil. And that's what it feels like when I listen to, say, The Billionaire Parent. As I'm listening to it, instead of you holding back, it's like I get to actually hear what you would say. Like if you were to say, "This dude is a dumbass,"
Yeah.
but if normally I wouldn't get to hear that. It'd be something very appropriate, and you might
Yeah,
tell,
right.
somebody might want to work with you, but they end up not working with you, and you leave them with this pleasant feeling, but you're really thinking, "You dickhead." But we get
Yeah.
to hear that you dickhead stuff, and so
I
that's
just
what
feel
I'm
like we
actually.
all do that, you know. We all think one thing and then we say the appropriate thing, and that's probably a good thing. But you know, in the written form, I can express what goes initially goes through my mind, and then what I say, which are two totally different things a lot of times. I think that's pretty universal.
I'm enjoying that about the Billionaire Parent, and you also did it on what was the other audio one you did? I'm drawing a blank, even though I know what it is that you have on YouTube.
What was this? Say it again.
The other one on YouTube, you have the Daily Adventures. You were doing that also on the Daily Adventures.
Yeah.
Like some guy was supposed to set up microphones. You had this exhaustive list about what he was supposed to do, and he didn't even come close to doing it. And then he wanted the way you were talking about setting it up. He was in there. Producer wouldn't want it this way, and
Yeah.
basically you're
Right.
like, yeah, like that whole thing. It's funny, but it's also revealing, and that stuff right there that you're doing, I really enjoy it.
Awesome.
Um, you had talked about on one of these, I think it was a Billionaire Parent, about what is a producer, how producers have changed, the idea of what a producer is has changed, and how
Yeah.
amateurs hurt and also help the industry. How do amateurs hurt and help the industry?
Well, they don't. I mean, my comment was that it's full of the business is full of dilettantes, but
Okay.
you know, really, that's really always the way it's been. I mean, people come in knowing nothing, and they have no restrictions, and they don't understand the restrictions, and so they do things, and they do things in a completely fucked up, backwards manner, and it ends up being amazing and creative. And that may also be the exception, but it is how things push forward, because you don't push things forward by doing things the same old way, right? And so it's okay to try new things, as long as you understand that there was a reason why people did it the other way, and you know, maybe eventually you kind of start to fall in line with that. But I think that dilettantes are very important to the business. Uh, they're a pain in the ass too, which is, you know, and they fuck everything up. But that's a good thing, I think, for music and art in general. So, you know, in that one sentence, I did write the one sentence, you know, that this is exactly what the music business was built upon. Well, that's true. I mean, look at the guys who started Atlantic, you know, in their house, songwriters basically. And they built their name just escaped me right now, but they built a multi-million, if not a multi-billion-dollar business.
On Back in the day, you were meeting with clients, and today you rarely meet with clients, right?
Mixed clients I don't meet very often, you
The
know,
mixed
because,
clients.
yeah, because they can put the tracks in the Dropbox. It is a little difficult, though. I got to say, uh, very careful about what band gigs I take from distance, because bands almost require being there to negotiate everything. And when you just send a mix and leave them to their devices to work out what their notes are, it gets a little squirrely. Artists, it's pretty easy, but you still got to get to know the person. Like, people have tastes, right? So just because I mix something a certain way, there may be things that I do in there that in the mix that I hear that you as the artist or the client don't hear quite the same way. And that may be universally across the board. Like, maybe you like the vocal half a dB louder than I like the vocal, which doesn't seem like much, but on a well carved out mix, that's a significant bump in level. Maybe some people like their backgrounds like even with the vocal, and other people like it way back. You know, I mix based on the song and based on what I think it should be, but a lot of times you're dealing with druthers, and so you got to get to know the person and what it is. And if I get a track that has DI'd guitars and it doesn't, they haven't made any real decisions on the distortion or the drive or anything like that, then how am I supposed to gauge where the track is supposed to go? I mean, you have to give me as a mixer some kind of indicators, production indicators within the recording. You know, in the 90s and aughts, when I would get 2-inch tapes by professional producers, it was really obvious how they wanted it mixed by how they recorded it. So that's not necessarily the case anymore. So there's a lot more interview time, a lot more back and forth on the notes, and it's just a little more difficult because if I'm with the artist or with the band, I can figure it out a lot quicker because we're there, we're working together, and everything's instant. With the band, we're going back and forth. With an artist, we're going back and forth until we get the mix, and then every subsequent mix after that, I'll get closer on my initial print to the kind of thing that they want to hear. All because I'm starting to understand what it is they like, how they hear things, where they're at as an artist, all of these things, their personality, all of these things are important in assessing how you want to approach a mix. And so it's a little more difficult these days because of that. And with bands, I'd much rather have the band in the room, because if I've got one person that's like just totally out of whack with what they want, I can shake them off. If I'm not there, I can't shake them off because I don't even hear the arguments. All I get back are notes. And like, I wasn't privy to the discussions, to what the drummer is saying, why it should be this way versus the guitar player arguing it should be this way. All I know is what the conclusion was. And if I'm not a part of that discussion and part of that process, then I can't say, wait a second, okay, here's why I have this guitar this way. Okay, and I can explain the rationale. And a lot of times, that changes their thinking and their perspective on how they view that mix decision. Because if it makes sense to them, they'll go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like on BJ's project, which I'm wrapping up this project with this guy BJ Liederman, who wrote all the music for NPR's Morning Edition and all of their shows, their intro music. And he has this song, History 911. And it's a 7-minute song, and it's got like 8 verses that are identical in melodic structure. And so it gets a little relentless. And so I wanted to do something with the production to keep everything moving forward so you didn't feel like it was a 7-minute song, and so you were pushed the way you needed to be as a listener. And he's kind of singing about Vietnam at the beginning of this song. So I'm like, well, I had the guitar player play this, really driving guitar part all alone with his vocal. And at first he's like, whoa, no, there's no way. That's just, I don't even get that at all. He did not understand why I would even do that. And interestingly enough, neither did Julian, my engineer on that session. He's like looking at me like I've totally lost my mind. And I'm like, look, you're talking about Vietnam. I mean, right at this point. and you're like talking about how the kids want to take back their country or whatever it is, and it's just kind of bold and rebellious. So let's make the music fit that, you know? And once I explained it like that, everybody got it. Then they understand why there was this distorted guitar alone with a vocal, which would make absolutely no sense with this particular artist until you think about the lyric and until you think about like what's going on with the track. And so if you're not there during the arguments, you're not there to sell those things, those kinds of things, and to lay out a reason that they can grasp hold of and say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Well, maybe it doesn't, and you come up with something else. But if you're not there for the discussion, all you're getting are the solutions. You're not getting any of the problems. And sometimes you got to know what the problems are to help figure out the solutions.
Have you experimented with any of the online solutions like Nicecast and SourceLive?
Like
Nicecast.
How is that a solution?
It's a solution because it's real time, meaning that while you're mixing,
oh, right,
you're getting your feed directly from your dog. I mean, I'm just asking you in that.
I haven't used any of those yet because I'm always worried that they're not going to be high enough fidelity, and A, and B, sometimes it's kind of difficult to schedule the sessions. I mean, really what I should do is it's really hard because I should actually try that. Do those things, are those like full fidelity? Like, or
Yeah,
are they use something?
Yeah, I've tested it out with several mixers, and they said it's the same quality as Spotify. It's 320 kbps MP3 they send out.
I can't do critical listening evaluations with anybody with 320 MP3s. It's got to be waves because it does lose something.
Okay, no, I get that totally, but you know, I'm just asking you along the lines of what you just said, as far as the general, maybe not the tweaking, but the general idea that people have. At least you can get them that in real time, and you can get feedback from them real time, as opposed to emailing them back and forth and blah blah blah.
Here's why I wouldn't be comfortable with that. If you take a 320 MP3 and you go back and forth between the WAV file, it can be difficult to tell immediately where the differences lie. But if you listen to a song that you know really well, and you listen to it on as a WAV file or CD file or whatever, and then you listen to it as an MP3, a song that you really like, okay, or that you have a stake in, whether it's something you're producing or whether it's something that you just love from your childhood or whatever. And you listen to the MP3, it's not so much the sonic differences that are the problem. The problem is you lose an emotional connection with the music. This is what I've found. I can't prove this. This is my observation and what I think happens between an MP3 and a wave. So we're no longer evaluating when someone's listening to a mix. They're not evaluating the sonic decisions. I mean, yeah, that's what we're discussing. That's what we're making changes on. But at the end of the day, what they're evaluating is how the song makes them feel. And if it's an MP3, I contend that they're losing so much on how the song makes them feel that it's a worthless exercise for me to try and do mix notes or work with a band from that because of that problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I agree with you. I think it loses a dimension going from, because if I use Logic and you output the WAV file or the AV file at the same time that you output the MP3, you can play both of them, and the MP3 is obviously lost dimension.
Yeah.
So yeah,
a lot of people can't hear that. But
no, yeah, it took me several years to actually hear that. But my question basically, what you answered was whether you think these online solutions are any type of help in the situations that you were talking about, as opposed to just, I'd rather just send them the WAV files or the AV files and just wait for feedback.
When they're full waves, it will help. Yeah, when it's full bandwidth, it will. But I'm reticent to do that with MP3s.
Cool. Eric, Dave Foray had a question, or for don't know how to say your last name, man. Sorry about that. But he said, "What's the future of the industry as a business? Where will we be in 5 years in regards to how revenue streams are generated? How many streaming platforms can exist in the marketplace?"
How many streaming platforms can what?
Exist in the marketplace?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to either of those. It's become very difficult to predict. I mean, thing is that you know, without getting too political, things are so fucked up in this country right now because districts are so gerrymandered. It's so tough. Basically, there's all these congressmen that are in completely safe districts. Forget about Republican, Democrat. When you have all these congressmen that are in safe districts, they don't have to try hard because they're not going to lose. The only thing that they have to try hard is to make sure that they can't be primaried. If they can win their primary, they will win the general. So the problem is that when you're in a safe district, and the only thing you have to worry about is if you're a Dem to your left and if you're a Republican to your right, well then you start to cater to those sides. And so as a consequence, nothing's getting done in Congress. And we already know, you know, I already talked about the power of the big tech lobby. And, you know, so when the fever is going to break, I don't know. We don't even know if Trump or Clinton's going to win, and we don't know how Congress is going to react with Clinton, and we don't know if they're going to stonewall the same way. But until Congress does something, it's really not going to. There's not going to be a fix to it. Maybe incrementally, it'll improve, but it's not. We're not going to rebuild this business to something that people can actually really have a reasonable shot at making a living doing. More than a living. You know, when I say there's no money in music, listen, you can go make $50 an hour if you're a good engineer. There's no reason you can't bring in $500 a day in just about any market. The problem is, that's what people were paid in 1986. Seriously. So what the fuck? Everybody's getting paid $50 an hour now, 30 years later? Well, how the fuck does that work? How do you pay your mortgage? I don't get it, you know? And yeah, okay, so the equipment's a little less expensive. That's great. Build-outs aren't. And so we don't do build-outs, you know? I mean, even I don't have a build-out on my mix room. I basically have a mix room in a box. I take all these tapestries. I cover all the walls with tapestries. I put blankets in the corners, folded up. I've got a mattress in the fucking closet. You know, I do whatever I have to do until I get that room sounding so that what's coming out is what I'm hearing in there. And I've got sound panels and stuff. And, you know, I can get away with that partly because I used to go into world-class rooms and hang up tapestries in there, and so I fuck up the acoustics in those rooms anyway, so I'm used to it. But, you know, my first attempt to put a room in a bedroom was a disaster until I figured out, oh, I need a really big fucking bedroom if I'm going to do this. And so once I figured that out, it became a lot easier. But you know, predicting where everything's going to go as far as getting paid is absolutely impossible. And I don't know how it's going to shake out with all of these different competing streaming sites. I mean, I can name 6 off the top of my head. And so how is that going to work? It's just everything's getting so bifurcated. Which, you know, competition's a good thing, except they're all in cahoots. None of them want to like stop making as much money as they do, so they're not going to. No one's going to wants to really like actually pay way more than anybody else. Apple says, "Oh, we're going to pay more than anybody else." Tidal says they'll pay more than everybody else. They're also going to charge twice as much. So you're going to pay $20 a month for your music? Well, it may be worthwhile if sound's important since they stream full waves, but really, the market's already spoken on that. That nobody fucking cares. Convenience is king.
Yeah, they don't care. Plus, Spotify, which everybody's using now, is created by the same guy that made Napster.
Yeah, well, it's all totally incestuous, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think that, unless they find
Figured out a new, better way to steal from us all.
right. So I think that unless they find a way to take it, which they won't, to take it back to physical media, there's no way to sell music. Like, you just can't. Like, you can sell records, you can sell CDs, you can sell tapes, you can sell mini discs. As soon as you, or you can sell, as soon as you put it on a file that's on a computer where I can send it to somebody else and it's the exact same copy, as opposed to, let's say you bought a vinyl record and then you recorded it to a cassette. The person who had the cassette has an inferior copy of that vinyl, so they might still go out and buy that vinyl, right? But if you, at this point, everything is on files, so as soon as you send the file to somebody else, they have the exact same copy. So it's
true. I think it's going to be that's less and less going to be a problem, because I don't really need the file, nor do I want the file. I think the further we get along in this, the more people are like, yeah, I don't want to store all this shit locally. So it becomes a point, like, if I can play my favorite song anytime I want from anywhere by streaming it, then there's really no reason for me to steal the file. So at that point, I just figure that the future is streaming for sure, to me. I don't really see any way around that. The problem is that we need to force the streaming sites, which are businesses, to pay the artists.
Yeah, the actual artists.
And that's what is fair, what's a fair price, what's a fair amount to force them to pay, is all debatable and will be debated. I can't even tell you the answer, but all I know is when I plug in the numbers, like I started plugging in, okay, what if it was a penny a song and you get $1 billion? And what if it's and I put in like $500 million. Really, I got up to 5 cents before it was anything close to what we got paid years ago. And so it's really hard for producers too, because all of my contracts are with the artist. So when I produce an album, this is the old model, right? You're a producer, you're an artist. You're on a label. You come to me, you say, or maybe the label introduces me to you, whatever, and we come to a deal. Okay, great. You want me to produce your album? Well, okay, so it's going to be, I want X amount of dollars up front as an advance, and I want 3 percentage points of your deal. Okay, so a typical artist deal then was between 12 and 16 points. They could be a little higher.
That's per album?
Per album. So let's say on a 16-point, let's say on a 3 times 4, let's say on a 12-point deal, right? 3% of their deal is 25% of their deal. Because 3 times 4 is 12. They had 12 points. Those 12 points were paid by the label to the artist, right? But I don't want the artist to pay me. I don't want the artist getting a check for $1 million and then having to send me money, because they won't send me the fucking money. So what the system that was made was a letter of direction, and the artist writes a letter of direction to the label and says, okay, label, when you send us money, take out our producer's money first and pay him, and then give us our money. So I would get my money from the label. So if the artist has no sales, I get no money. If the artist sells 1 million copies, I make a lot of money. If the artist makes no sales but is streamed like crazy and is played on radio like crazy, but for some reason doesn't sell anything, I make no money. Okay? So all of these deals, whether it's producer with the artist or artist with the label, do not include streaming. Led Zeppelin didn't have anything with the streaming. Nobody even knew what streaming was, of course, back then. Even the new deals, the artists get none of the streaming revenue. So, how is a producer supposed to get a back end if if the place where he's supposed to get back end doesn't even exist?
Agreed.
This is the quandary that we're in.
Agreed. So along those lines, what do you feel about online performances, such as people want to do live concerts online and attempt to monetize that? Does that sound feasible to you?
Sure, it happens. But I mean, at the end of the day, do I want to watch a live concert in my living room, or do I want to go see the live concert?
You want to go see the live concert, yeah.
Right, and that's why live concerts are good, still good money makers. But the problem is, you can't, as a producer, go and profit share off the live concert because it's very easy to make no money. Everybody can get paid. The drummer's getting paid. The bass player's getting paid. The artist is getting big time paid, right? But with all the overhead and with everybody, you know, where all the money gets dispersed, by the time you get back, everybody's got money in their pocket, but there's no profit. So how are you supposed to? You can't. There's no. It's not anywhere you can take revenue out of. Now, a lot of times, especially when you're just starting out, you're taking a loss. I mean, in the aughts, the big reason to sign with a label was less about the distribution and more about the tour support. Because without the tour support, you couldn't go and do a big tour. And you can't, you know, a lot of artists need to go on tour to really develop a fan base. Ben Harper, who I've done 3 albums with, that guy picked up his entire fan base just by touring. I mean, when I saw him for the Burn to Shine album in '99, he had just gotten off a year of playing over 300 dates in a year. 300 dates. The guy was so exhausted, he wanted to take 6 months to record his album just so he didn't have to be out on the road. He was just shot. So that guy built his entire thing just by going out and hitting the road, picking up one person at a time, and that's how he did it. But, you know, he had to have support for that. He had to have a label supporting that so that when you go on tour and maybe you go somewhere that isn't really economically feasible, you're going to take a loss on it, or you're going to go do a run that you're going to take a loss on, and you know you're going to take a loss on, but it's worthwhile for the big picture, you got to have support behind you. Because most artists, when they're starting out, don't have a cache of cash that they can use for flow. So really, and publishing, nobody wants to give up their publishing. So it's just a problem. It's been a problem.
So basically, based on what you said earlier, your position at this point is that the best place to be is as a songwriter who happens to also be a producer, who happens to also be able to mix.
The best place to be is writing songs, and always has been. It still is. If you want to produce, and it's important to produce, if you're a songwriter, you need a vehicle for your songs, right? You got to have an artist singing your songs, unless you're going to sing them yourself, at which point you're an artist-songwriter or singer-songwriter. So yeah, it behooves you to become a producer, find singers, and have them sing your songs, and try and find them a deal. But it's still a very difficult uphill climb because you're, you know, labels, they use the same guys, man. I mean, there's apparently just 5 guys that do like a huge percentage of the big hits on the radio right now. And they have writing teams where all they do is they write together and they write song after song after song, and they throw them out and throw them out and throw them out until they got a winner, and then they turn in the winner, and then that's me. And or someone goes through all the winners and says, well, no, this is the only real winner, and then that's me. And so it's just a numbers game. It's not even like it's not like you can sit down and write a hit. You can sit down and write a song, and if it's a hit, or you think it could be a hit, you can recognize it as such, but it's not a hit until it actually gets a reaction. So you can focus group, you can write a song, I can write 10 songs, you can go focus group it, play it for a bunch of people. Oh man, Eric, this song gets crazy. Everybody loves this song, they want to hear it again and again and again. That's a good song. Now we need an artist because we've got to sell the song. You can't sell the song without an artist. So you got to get the artist. And so, yeah, if you're going to be in this business and you want to produce, you're best off songwriting producing. But that can change. 5 years from now, pop could be out. Rock could be the big thing. Who the hell knows? We never know. So you got to always be. That's why I never wanted to stick with one genre. I mean, I've done hip hop records, I've done country records, I've done rock records, I've done EDM records, I've done every kind of music you can imagine. And there's a reason for that, because A, I don't want to keep making the same record over and over again because it's boring, and B, because all the genres require different knowledge and understanding, and so I want to constantly be developing myself, and so I want to constantly be doing something new. And so you can't just, it may be more lucrative to stick with one genre and only do that genre and be the best in that genre, but at the end of the day, I think we kind of do this for more than just money.
Well,
I'm a big proponent of people making as much money as possible, so I do bitch and complain about that. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, I don't make nearly the kind of money I did producing an album that I did 10 years ago, but I still do it. It's just different, is all.
But you have to say that also your experience over the time frame of your amazing career has helped you kind of anticipate the cycles in pop music that are coming up, right? I mean, it's every 20 years we see a resurgence in a specific genre. Like right now I'm seeing a lot of 80s themed production kind of coming back into style, and I think it only helps us as engineers to be more diverse and not be so genre specific.
I agree. That's why I chose that trajectory for myself, specifically and purposely. But I don't know about predicting. I've got to tell you, man, we've been in this 80s cycle for a long, long time now. Like, I don't know when that fever's going to break. But at the same time, it's 80s style, but it's completely different at the same time. I mean, there's way more low end.
Right. It's like a modern twist on that kind of feel.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes, I agree with you on that. And I mean, for years, I would do records where I wouldn't put any reverb on the vocals and stuff and whatever. And now I almost never do that, just because it's just so out of style, really. I mean, we do have to take into account the style of the day when we're mixing. You don't want to just completely ignore that unless I'm doing something that's specifically a retro kind of production. Then I'm gonna use the style or the sound of that time, but I'm still gonna keep it modern. If I'm gonna do an 80s style production, I'm not gonna mix it with no low end, like they did in the 80s. Because that just won't come off. It's just you're basically creating a feeling of a production of a time period more than actually copying that actual production.
More of like a throwback or an homage per se, I guess.
More of an homage, yeah, where you listen to it and you get the feeling of that.
I think that's a really good point that you just touched on, of creating that feeling, and I think that's, as mixers and as producers, that's something that we're constantly searching for, right? Is how can we create that emotional connection with our listeners, understanding that creating that connection is going to be dependent on, the time in that person's life, where they hear the song, when they hear the song, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this article, but there was an article going around Facebook. I posted on Mixermania. Oh, no, I didn't actually. Somebody else did. I was going to, and then I realized somebody else did. But it was about all these
the millennial.
All these fucking songs, right? Like, it was crazy. There was like 10, 15 songs on this thing, one after another. That's a minor third. Oh, say, can you see? That's the minor third starts that song. And every song they played, it's using that interval. The fifth of the root chord to the third of the root chord. I mean, it's crazy how much people copy everything that everybody else is doing at any given time. And it kind of makes you wonder, how the hell does the guys who wrote Blurred Line, Farrell and what's the pretty boy's name?
Robin Thicke.
And Robin Thicke, how is it that they are sued for infringement for a feel? It's not even the same exact chord progressions. It's not the same melody. It's basically kind of a groove, feel, and even that's not exact. How is it that gets sued, yet everybody and their brother is putting oh in their fucking song, and nobody's getting sued over that? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so, you know, this is one of the things I touch on in the new book, Mixerman and the Billionaire Parent, is everybody in all the other producers in the book start getting their own billionaires, because that's the only way anybody can make any money, is to have your own billionaire. And so all my producer friends have their billionaires, and one person puts a sitar in their song, and next thing you know, every single one of them is putting sitars in their songs, because that's what's hot, and you got to do what's hot, because if you don't do what's hot, you're not going to get a hit. So you got to do, if the sitar is the big thing, then fuck it, put a fucking sitar in. What does it matter if it goes with the production or not? And that's always been how the music business is. Always. That's just human nature. That's also art nature. People start to hear something, it's recognizable. You know that if you can give something to someone that they can grasp onto immediately, that they can react to immediately, you got them hooked. That's why they call it a hook, right? And so, oh, that's now the big hook that everybody's putting in there. You figure you put that in there, maybe you got a shot at having a hit.
Well, it seems like the stuff that you're talking about with Billionaire Parent is the same thing as vanity projects. Maybe it isn't, but are you familiar with that term, vanity projects, which is basically...
Yeah, I talk about it in the book.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I haven't read it, but the point is that I'm a fan of vanity projects. Friends of mine used to have a studio, and basically everything they did was demos. Like, everything they did was people who wanted to be considered rappers. So they would come into the studio and they would record these things just so they could take them back around the way and play them for people and blah, blah, blah. You never heard any of them hit the radio, but my friends were getting paid because all these people just wanted to be known as rappers. So they wanted to go to the studio and they wanted to lay down tracks. So to me, at this point in time, the same thing that you're talking about, that seems to be the move. Just find somebody who has the budget, who could pay you for the certain amount of time, and you give them that amount of time for that amount of money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great, and that's a living. But you know, we deserve to have a career and the ability to retire. And you know, there's lots of people who are content making a living, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. But what I'm saying is that it used to be that you could do more than just make a living. You could actually get ahead. And at the moment, by doing vanity projects or whatever, that pays the bills. That's all good. But at the end of the day, we're getting older. And at some point, you're not going to be able to do this anymore. Okay? Like, I don't know where the line is. It depends on each individual person. But there's perception issues. I mean, how am I, if I'm not a legend, or if you're not a legend, or whoever, and you're 60, right? And I'm not a legend, so I'm 60, and I'm working with these 21-year-olds. Do they really want, like, where's this connection exactly? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, okay, I know how to make a record. I can make a record with 21-year-olds even at 60. But do they believe that? Right? So we have to deal with those realities. Then there's the physical realities. At some point, you know, am I going to be able to hear like I used to? How long will I be able to get away with diminishing returns on my hearing before before I can't just rely on relativity and being able to just evaluate where things are at and kind of get in the, close enough or in the ballpark. At what point does it get to the point where it's just my shit doesn't sound good anymore, right? So we have to accept that there's a limit. You're not going to be doing this at 80. So, which is why I started writing, because I understood this, as we all probably do. But you got to think about it. You can't just understand it. You have to think about it, and you have to plan ahead. And if all you're doing is making a living, and you're not getting ahead, and you're not saving money, and you're not putting money away, and you're not able to really get ahead, then how are you going to retire? And what are you going to do when you retire? And I just think that people in this business deserve the opportunity to retire if they're really good. And not everybody is going to be in that position, but currently, no one can even get in that position.
Right. One of the things that you mentioned earlier I found interesting and hadn't heard about before was the concept of retiring on residuals, or what happened? I mean, I guess it's the same thing of the lack of ability to sell physical copies. Oh, I think you fell out. Oh, mic check, mic check.
I'm still with you.
All right. Hey, Dan.
Yeah, you still on, bro. You still in.
We're still hearing you.
Good, good. Yeah, I think he fell out for a second, so hopefully he'll be right back.
Looks like yeah, dropped out.
But yeah, one of the things he was talking about earlier was the idea of retiring off of royalties. And that's what I was just about to ask him about. I thought that was an interesting idea, and I was going to ask him if he felt like that disappeared because of the way that suddenly you can't sell physical copies of music anymore and it's all digital. Anybody have any ideas about that?
I do. I think going away from a material product is, I'm trying to think who said it, but I don't know if it was Zappa or there was somebody that said streaming is going to destroy the music business, and I think they were right, because not having a physical product, we lose a lot of things. We don't have credits in albums. We don't have, the album liners, all the things that were so great about a listening experience, to sit there with the album, look at the credits, read who played on it. I mean, I think, haven't we all done that?
Yeah, no liner notes, nothing.
But I mean, isn't that part of the experience, or wasn't that part of the experience growing up for all of us?
Was and that's the operative word. It was. I
Yeah.
don't hear about that anymore, unfortunately.
I think that's what's missing from when you buy a tune on. Hey, Eric. Glad you made it back. I think that's what's missing from buying a tune on iTunes or streaming it, is you don't have that listening experience where you have a physical product in your hands, where you have...
Am I there?
Yeah, you're in. We were just discussing while you were getting back in.
Okay, you guys can hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I forgot to put a quarter in the meter.
It's okay.
I didn't bring up my power cord, and I didn't notice that I killed my battery on that.
Yeah, mine's probably going to go soon too. Eric, you're preaching the gospel. The last couple things you said about hearing, and are the writers going to want to use you and work with you because they're younger? Some time ago, I worked at Warner Brothers, and I saw an interesting side of that, where, for the writers for the shows, you'd see these young writers getting on these shows, and some of the execs felt like, these guys, we have to hire them because they can write for young people. They understand what young people want, and in some cases, they weren't really necessarily qualified to be doing that. They were just there because they had the youth and the outlook of youth, and I think that's what's happening with That's one of the challenges with music now. It's generational. So if that generation doesn't think that you're hip to what they're doing or that you're speaking for their generation, it's harder to get projects to work with those kind of people. Even though you might be, fully versed and very competent, and it's a very easy thing for you to do.
I agree with everything that John sees. Sorry to jump in. I agree with everything that John, that you just said. I've experienced it actually from the other side as a younger guy coming up. When I get hired for blues sessions or throwback R&B sessions, soul music, I always get looked at as like, you're the young guy. What do you know?
What do you know?
What
Exactly.
do you know? Right. Exactly. And through
Yeah.
this session, it's like you're always, from both sides, I think you're able to kind of convey that message to the client, but it's overcoming that initial perception that can
It's
be
tough.
It can be quite difficult.
Yeah, it's tough. You got to play them. You either have to have a lot of stuff you can play them, or you just have to have a connection. You have to establish a connection somehow.
I would say this: there's some merit to it. I feel. I mean, if a lot of people really do, they kind of just get set in their ways and they stick with what they know, and they don't like. They're not researching what's happening now and like understanding what's happening now, and so. There are people that you probably shouldn't work with as they get older, if you're young. It doesn't mean that everybody, and there's always exceptions to the rule, but I mean, there is a little bit of merit to that. If you don't understand what it is that the kids are listening to or like, then you kind of got to rely on the youth to help you with that. Now, for me, if I'm working with a band that is doing something that I think is like completely interesting and outside of my scope or whatever, I'm going to lead them to do their thing, rather than I'm not going to instill. I'm going to let them teach me, and I'm going to tell them whether it's great or not. Okay, and that's where my power lies with a band like that. But at the end of the day, you still are going to come against age problems at some point. I mean, right now I'm 49. I'm not running into that yet, but it's going to happen. There's no way around it.
What do you think about finding new clients, such as, for instance, in New York, there's a lot of pay-to-play. So if you go to a bar to listen to a band play, most likely, first of all, they paid the venue to be able to play there, and then they're trying to get their money back by selling tickets, and they're probably renting their own space for practice and blah, blah, blah. What do you think as far as cultivating new groups or artists who might want to work with you? Is that something that it's on your radar?
I've never had a lot of luck going and cultivating work by going and seeing bands live. It's a very awkward setting. Other people may be better at it than me. I'm sure they are. I mean, I'm an introvert, and I'm much better off when I'm in my surroundings, and when I'm in the studio and whatever. And I just think for me, it's always been a tough sell. I mean, I've been pretty fortunate. I do have a discography, and I got a lot of stuff that covers a lot of ground on my discography, and so people still find me. And I do look for stuff too, and I look on the internet, and if I hear something that I like a lot, I will send a note and say, I really love this. If you're ever thinking about recording, please reach out. Some people do, some people don't, whatever. But going to live shows and trying to sell a band at a live show has never been something that I've found to be very fruitful.
That makes sense. What about the idea of having a manager, like somebody who specifically goes around and tries to sell your discography to bands?
I've had managers. Most of them don't do that. If I was a young producer, I might want to find a young manager who's really hungry and who wants to build his thing at the same time. But usually, if you got to approach the manager, they're not interested. So that's always an interesting thing too. I don't currently have a manager. All of the management companies, the big ones, kind of blew up about 8 years ago, along with everything else. So there's still people doing it, but I don't know what they're necessarily bringing to the party. I mean, even when I had a manager, I got all my gigs, man. I never got a gig from a manager, and I didn't need my manager to negotiate. A lot of times, I'd get a better deal by negotiating it myself, because I wasn't afraid to lose the gig, and he was afraid to lose the gig because then it looks bad. You know, I'd be like, dude, how'd you lose my gig? I would rather be super aggressive with my price, and then if I lose the gig, I can live with it. So,
how do those two balance out though? As you said, you're an introvert. Plus, you just said you like to be aggressive with your tactics.
Just because I'm an introvert doesn't mean I can't talk to people. It means that when I'm in a social setting where the difference between an introvert and an extrovert is this. First of all, there's no such thing as a pure introvert or a pure extrovert. Everybody's got a little bit of both. But someone who leans introvert, when they are in a social setting or a party or something of the like, energy is being sucked from them. When they're an extrovert and they go to a party with lots of people, they're deriving energy from that situation. So if I go to a setting where there's a lot of people, I only really got a couple hours before I'm like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I cannot handle this anymore. Okay? That's what makes me an introvert. But it doesn't mean that I'm not, obviously I can talk to people.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's an interesting way to describe it. And it does make sense as far as whether someone would want to go into a crowd to attempt to, network or socialize, or whatever, as opposed to, as you said, fortunately for you, you already have your discography. People will say, oh, hey, I like that Far Side record, or I like this, or I like the Foreigner, or whatever, and I want to contact the guy who did that because I want him to do the same thing for me.
Yeah. It's got, sales is an important aspect of this gig. You got to be able to sell yourself. I just find it's easier for me. I just figured out where my strengths and weaknesses are on the pitch and where that is and how to do that. And I work towards my strengths rather than try and force something that I'm not particularly comfortable with. Like, I don't like bothering people after they got done a fucking set, I mean, I kind of understand, like, where their head is at, and it's certainly not in making a record. They just got done a set, and they're either pissed off because they couldn't hear anything, or there's not enough people there, or they fucked up the bridge on a song, or their girlfriend's mad at them, or whatever, and it's just not an ideal time to have a conversation about, how we can make a great record when you're already touring one right now. You're not even thinking about the next record.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm a player, so I'm coming from more of a player's outlook. And when I get to a gig, the last thing I want when I'm trying to set up my rig is somebody coming up and say, hey, man, I do this and I do that, or, let's get together and connect. And it's difficult for me because I'm trying to focus on getting my stuff plugged in, getting my guitars tuned. So it's just like when people come up and talk to you, I have this game face that I put on that's really, really kind of just a facade.
That's the other thing. And you're shut down, and your guards are up because you got hunters coming up to you and saying all sorts of fucking crazy shit, and so you don't know who this person is. It's just another person that's coming up to you.
Yeah, I agree.
I've found some success approaching bands at shows. Usually it's avoiding exactly kind of what you just said. I wait until well after they're set, so they're broken down, they've gotten a drink, they're relaxing in relax mode, but I think the key to this is the context, and the context of how you approach a band in that setting is so fine that if you catch them, like Eric said, if you catch them on a bad day or a bad set or or they had, their truck broke down on the way to the venue or whatever. It's like all of that can kind of play, I guess, the success that you'll get off of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think waiting till after is always a good thing, because for me, after the gig's over, I kind of sigh of relief, because it's like, okay, I made a couple mistakes, but I nailed all the tunes, or I remembered that part that I was worried I wasn't going to remember, and so after the gig's done, it's totally different time than before.
I've also found something that kind of helps that transition, actually, for anybody else that's looking to do this, is it requires spending money, but I buy merch. I will buy a band's T-shirt, I will buy their CD, I will buy whatever, and use that as kind of an opening to talk to them, right? Like, I really like what you guys are doing, I want to support, your business and your work. Maybe this can turn into something later, who knows?
Yeah, that's all good. I mean, I shouldn't say I've had no results, but they're definitely, it's more of a long-term thing, I mean, like I said, you're hitting a band that's probably touring their latest work anyway, so you're not even going to get to, it's really just an introduction at that point, because you're not going to get to talking about an album for a year anyway, possibly. And so,
Yeah, it's more or less opening that connection.
And it's totally different going and meeting a band that kind of knows you and making a cold call in that situation. I find a cold call in that situation just really rough. And so I just decided a long time ago, it's not worth my going out, spending, whatever money in gas, money in beer, money in whatever, for what I get very little return on, It's really about efficiency.
Eric, do you still find that you have to, like, when you are approaching people, do you still find that you have to kind of point out your credits? It's kind of like if you talk to people in LA, within the first 3 sentences, you already know who they've played with, and like last month when I was, you know what I mean? Do you find that you still have to do that?
I became very comfortable very early on, dropping every fucking thing that I've worked on. You meet someone, oh yeah, I just did the Far Side record, and I did, I worked with this person, then you try and find some commonality and whatever. You got to be comfortable telling people the shit you've done. As I get older, it's true, I'm less about that, and more like, go fucking look it up, and that has its merits too, that methodology. But I still can drop a name, it's not really a problem. If that's going to establish, look, I'm not just some fucking punter, then fine. I'll lay it out there. But I prefer nowadays. It's almost more fun to let people find out afterwards. Like, people will come on and play on a session, and then they like, whoa. And then they realize that, I've actually done some shit. I'm not like the studio engineer. So.
That's so awesome.
Can I jump in there real quick? It's interesting because, from corporate world, name dropping is bullshit. They consider that, you're just trying to get somewhere, just trying to do something, whatever. But it sounds like you're saying that in this industry, name dropping is not only okay, it's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. To some degree, absolutely, sure. I mean, especially if you're young and being aggressive, it's a parlay. It's all parlay. So I go to LA. 6 months I work at Capitol doing setup, which was a great experience, by the way, because I learned how to set up for strings and stuff, because they had all this huge, 60-person orchestras doing for film and stuff. And so then I got fired, and so then Hollywood Sound hired me as an assistant, and I got the Far Side album, and I worked on the Far Side album, and then finally I had a credit, like I had something that people were aware of. I just worked on the Far Side. Absolutely, you got to tell everybody and anybody you come across that's going to possibly have a recording budget or is in that whole circle or in that scene who you are, because they got to know who you are, because if they don't know what you've worked on, they're not going to talk to you about working on their stuff. So you have to be comfortable with being completely shameless and promoting yourself.
You just need one really
just
recent
part
credit.
of the deal.
You just need one really good recent credit, and you can work it.
Right, you work that, you parlay that into a second, and then you say, oh, I did volume 10 and The Far Side, and then you parlay that into another one. Oh, I just
Next
did
we end
a
up like
brand new
Mixerman.
heavy, and then you parlay that into another one. Oh, I just did Ben Harper's. Now I got 4 names I can drop, and you just keep adding to the list, and then eventually you stop. But yeah, you gotta drop names. People diss people for it, but whatever. Are you going to get the gig by not telling them? Then fuck it. Who cares?
Are you fucking working or not?
Exactly.
That's
It's
right.
funny because we hear it and we all go, okay, sell, 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 sell. I know what you're doing. Go, go, go.
Yeah, I mean, but there's a difference between dropping names that you actually worked with and fabricating things. You know what I'm saying? So it's one thing to say I did this, I did that, and it's documented and everybody knows that you did it. And it's another thing when you just try to say, oh, I'm on the same level as all these people, and trust me, and don't worry about it, and if you go with me, you'll get the there's a way of dropping names that's legitimate, meaning I actually did business with these people. And then there's another way of doing it where you can't back up what you just said.
The funny thing is, skills rarely ever comes into play, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how fucking shitty a record is, or how shitty sounding a record is. If it's a big hit and you mention that record, you will get work from it. Period. Because all anybody cares about, oh, that's a big song. He's working a big song. People know that song. I know that song. I want to work with this guy. And it doesn't matter. And I've watched like just horrific sounding records. Like guys get work and work and work and work. And you just go, is anybody listening to this stuff? And it doesn't matter. All that matters is a hit. When I was making reels, I don't have to make a reel anymore because people can get it online. But when I had to make, someone would say, I'm interested in working with you, Eric. Okay, I'll make you, can you give me an example of your work in this genre? Well, I used to actually give them their music in that genre, and then I realized, you know what? Why am I doing that? I'll just put the songs that are the most recognizable on the reel, whether it has anything to do with what they're doing or not. And let me tell you something, worked like a charm every time. Every time I put all of my biggest records on the reel, I usually got the gig, or at least I got the conversation.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, that's a very good technique.
Yeah, that's gold.
What I'm finding interesting is when you're talking about the quality, basically the sound quality isn't necessarily it. Somebody, if they have 42 million sales, which not today, say 42 million views, but the album sounds like crap, that supersedes everything. And I was just looking at somebody's discography and listening, and it's distorted like crazy. I'm not going to say the name, but there's all these views. What?
I said Rick Rubin?
Oh, that's cold. No,
I thought he was talking about Terry Date, man.
Whatever, all of his records are distorted, but I also happen to know how Rick listens to shit, so whatever. I mean, go on.
But no, just exactly what you were talking about. Like, I've been in conversations recently where people were talking about their sonics are wonderful and blah, 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 and then I go and listen, and it's super distorted, and they're saying how wonderful it is, and then
it's all
I'm
bullshit.
listening to, and then I'm listening to somebody else say, a mastering engineer saying, when such and such happened, there's just this tiny bit of distortion. I'm thinking, what the hell are you talking about? This other thing that was mastered is supremely distorted, and you're talking about this minute bit of distortion. And then I go and listen to even me when I'm listening, and I'm thinking, damn, this is distorted. And I go and I look at the views. It's 42 million views. I'm like, oh, I have something to learn because this must be awesome. It just kicked out my thought of this is crap. There's must be awesome, or I'm missing something because 42 million people like this.
There's no accounting for taste.
Don't care about distortion.
Yeah, we were listening.
Distortion is part of the sound today.
It's the lowest common
denominator.
denominator.
Inappropriate distortion. But,
it's the lowest common denominator. It's like what the average Joe on the lower end of the scale listens to and likes. I mean, the quality is shit, but that's what's selling.
But there are mastering engineers who have several devices to add types of distortion.
Oh yeah, they're the worst. You kidding me? The mix engineers get the blame for the record sound the way they do. It's not the fucking mix engineers. Maybe some of them, but for the most part, it's the mastering engineers that are stomping on it. That's why I was always, throughout my career, really, really involved in the mastering process. Like, when I was in the middle of mixing the record, if I had my clients who were really, we love it, we're really excited, we're so happy, thank you, we're good. Great, I got you right where I want you. Now, let's talk about mastering. Oh, who are you thinking about having mastered? Well, we were going to have this person. Yeah, he doesn't really line up with me very well. Maybe you might get a better result if you use this guy. At the time, for a long time, it was Dave Collins. Maybe you should use Dave Collins. And, oh, well, what's Dave done? And show him the discography and kind of walk him through the process. And otherwise, because what I found was if I waited until the end of the project and they went on their way, that opportunity was lost. Next thing I know, it's being mastered by this guy. They're fucking putting it as loud as they possibly can. You can hear, like, compression artifacts. They've made it super bright. And it's like, it's not even my mix anymore. And so, once you put a compressor on in the mastering stage, you're taking away you're changing the balances, which is why I use a compressor in the mix stage. And so, like, I wanted guys that kind of understood how I hear things, rather than getting it and decide, well, this doesn't fit in the box of how I hear things, so I'm going to make it sound how I hear things. Excuse me, but I want someone to master my work that understands how I hear things. Because the client's happy right now, and so if we want to keep them happy and not have them be confused and upset after the process, let's get the guy who's going to go and just bring this up to the next level. And so I was always really involved with that, and much more than other guys, much more than other engineers and mixers. When it came to that, and usually I got them to use whoever it is I want them to use, and that way I had some control over the final result. If I had just mixed records and just let whoever master it all the time, then I would have been unhappy with a whole lot of records, and I may have changed the trajectory of certain things. Maybe certain records don't sound as good as they. Who knows? You never know. So I always found it important to see the project all the way through. If I'm going to be listed as the mix engineer, and if mastering can completely change the way the mixes sound, then I better get involved in the mastering to some degree.
I'm glad you're saying that, because some, like a mastering engineer may come in and belittle whoever's working on the project and tell them, well, you just don't know any better. It needs saturation and whatever, and they actually change the sound, and people submit to that. So yeah, having somebody like you involved who would, counteract that is a good idea for people, instead of just
the moment
handling
a mastering engineer puts a compressor on a mix, it's no longer your mix. And that, to me, is saying you don't know what you're doing. The moment a mastering engineer does that. I would much rather the mastering engineers, and I understand their position, they don't want to be criticizing their client and whatever, but it'd be better to say, listen, I'm going to compress this for you, but I'm just going to tell you right now that you need to compress your stuff more. Because when I put the compressor on, it's going to change the balances. And if you compress it, then you're going to be able to live with your balances. So, maybe you consider trying to learn how to mix with a compressor. I mean, maybe that's a hard thing for someone to say. I don't know, but to me, this whole idea that the mastering engineer knows better than the mix engineer is just utter fucking bullshit, because a mastering engineer does not listen to emotional impact of a track. The mastering engineer doesn't give a flying fuck if the big section gives them goosebumps. As a mix engineer, I do care about that. And so, as a mastering engineer, all they care about is whether it fits within certain sonic frequency parameters and level parameters. But so why would I want to take away or give power to the person who has the least amount of control to affect the emotional impact of the record. It doesn't make any sense. So the mix engineer has to control the impact of the record, and that's all set up by everything before him. Really, it's all set up by pre-production. Okay, so it goes all the way to the beginning. But if all those things happen right along the way, and the mix engineer has something they can work with and it comes out great, then why are we going to go and stomp on it with a mastering engineer? Why are we going to give someone the power to go and who spends the least amount of time on the project and who has the least amount of understanding of the artist, probably hasn't even met the artist, who has the least amount of understanding of what people are trying to achieve, is now making the decisions as to how that record is going to sound. That makes no sense.
And
What
they
is
make
it
a
that
big
you
chunk of
expect
change.
from a mastering engineer when you send something? Oh, sorry about that. Well, when you give something to a mastering engineer, what exactly are you expecting from them?
Very simply, I just want it to be better. I realized that, trying to figure out whether he added a little bit of this or took away this or whatever was not really, or how much dB of gain reduction or whatever, or limiting, that none of that was information that helped me at all. The only thing that helped me was, does it sound better? And is there more emotional? The parts where the high points, are they getting me better? And when I listen to it, do I continue to listen to it and go, does that sound right? Or do I start to sing? And if I start to sing, and I start to move, and I forget that I'm supposed to be listening to the mastering and evaluating, and then I got to go to the beginning again and do it again, and the next thing I know I'm singing. That's a good mastering job. I can't even get through the song without starting to sing, so I'm not listening to it anymore. That's how I know I'm done a mix too, right? But basically, my process is I put in the mastering, the mastered job, and I may put in the unmastered mix and just check it real quick and see, and if it's better, I'm happy. That's what it comes down to. It's really that simple. And I don't do this back and forth A-B thing, matching levels and whatever. Fuck that. I put the song on, I listen to the song, verse, chorus, I may get to the bridge, whatever. I put the other one on, I listen to the song. Usually I know instantly, that draws me in more. Now this is better. This is a better, Dave has taken my mix and he's brought it to the next level. In fact, me and Dave would always had a running joke. I would call him after he mastered an album and be like, dude, you saved my ass. Thank you so much. And he'd be laughing at me because he'd be like, dude, all I did was put a half dB at a wideband at 16K or 18K, whatever he was doing. But to me, it was so much better. It was such a big difference. And it was that I would like instantly give him credit for having saved my ass. Pretty interesting.
Okay, now you had talked about interns on the Billionaire. Are you still having difficulties when it comes to getting interns, teaching them, and it being a waste of time, or do you even do it these days?
I've never had an intern. I've tried it. I mean, I shouldn't say I've never had an intern. I've tried it. I don't know, man. You have to have someone that's exceptionally, for me, I have to have someone that kind of takes control. Most interns aren't comfortable with that. Like, I'll just do my thing. Like, I can't be distracted and whatever. And it's like, if you want to take something off my plate, then you got to take it off my plate and show me that you can do it. And
Take charge.
Yeah, take charge.
Well,
like, I don't want to tell you what's good. You know, I worked with George Drakoulias on a record. I've worked with him on a few things, but on one particular one, I just never ever forget this. He said, I said, well, dude, he's like complaining about the drum sounds, and it wasn't really my fault. The drummer was awful. We didn't have enough time. It was just bullshit, right? But the thing that he said to me was, I said, I don't know what it is you want, George. He says, I want it fucking good. That's it. That's all he wanted. He wants it good. Okay, so yeah, all right. Well, a lot of shit falls into that, but at the end of the day, it wasn't good what was coming out of those speakers. So, you know, he's like, "What do I? Magenta, lavender? What the fuck do you want me to say? I want it good." And that just stuck with me for many years afterwards. And as a producer, I understand that now. You know, years later, I go, "Yeah, okay. I just want it good. If you don't know what I think is good, then we can't work together. And if you can't figure out what I think is good, then you're not the right guy to work with me, you know? So it's got to be someone who's aggressive, who's going to just take over. I got a guy I'm working with now. I mean, I'm paying him. You know, I pay him to do projects, whatever. I don't really like not paying people. So I pay him, but he's got a good sensibility, and what he delivers is good. And so I'm happy. And so it's good.
But aren't interns taught just to do the exact opposite? They're taught to be quiet, listen, do what you're told, suck it in. You know,
sure, that's a great way to not get ahead.
Yeah, just a comment on that. I managed a post facility for a short time, and I was actually in charge of the intern program. And I set it up and brought in a bunch of guys from Ithaca College and Full Sail. And the thing that I noticed was that if a guy doesn't come to the gig already prepared to do either a record or an orchestra or whatever the job is on his own without help, he's probably not going to last very long, because guys that don't have that drive and that ambition, they're not going to have the sense of what needs to be done, and that's what you need to have. Yes, you need to sit in a room with 5 producers and the engineer and not say anything unless somebody asks you, but you still have to, when somebody asks you, you need to step up and really start to deliver on a very high level. And I think that's where what hangs people up is because they think they're going to go in and somebody's going to kind of bring them along and show them the ropes and show them everything, and it really doesn't work that way in an intern environment.
I don't have time to show you the ropes. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like if you're an intern and you're sitting in the back of the room with those 5 producers that you just mentioned, and like if you're paying attention, just the simple act of if I'm like going like this, of handing me a pen, that you just made yourself so worthwhile to me, because I didn't have to like say anything. You handed me a pen. You saw that I needed a pen. You handed me a pen. Now I can write something. Everything's moving forward. You know, that's a useful thing. So, but most kids and interns, they just kind of sit there and wait for some instruction. And I had one intern at the studio. You know, I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, coming up on a year ago now. Partly because the only thing that's being made in LA is pop music anyway, and I'm not getting back into that rat race, and I get my work from all over the world, so I really didn't need to be in LA anymore. My son was done school, so I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to go to Asheville. There's a world-class studio here. And so, you know, I've been producing out of that studio, and they had an intern there, and I always invite the interns into the room. Like, I go, come on into the room, hang out. The guy, like, the moment he could, he ran away, left the room. I'm like, whatever, you know, you're never going to ever do anything here. That's not, I'm inviting you in the room, and the first thing you do is run away? That doesn't make any sense. So, I don't know. You can't teach people to be aggressive, and you don't have to be aggressive to be successful. But I think from an intern position, you need to be watching, first of all, gauging who it is you're working with and what it is you can be with that person, which is really no different than real life. I mean, you know, I have to gauge my clients and how I talk to them. Some people I can be far more aggressive with than others. And that's just life. And so I don't know how you teach someone how to intern. And I don't have time to teach someone how to intern. I just need help. And if you can help me, then there's going to be opportunities. And if you're just going to be more cost me more time than the help that you can offer, then there's going to be not so many opportunities. And listen, at the end of the day, once everything's done, I will sit down with anybody and talk to them for an hour about what I did or what I thought or anything. That's not a problem. But when I need help, I need help. And if I have to teach you how to help me, then you're not helping.
Yeah, the biggest skill is anticipating needs.
Yeah.
What gets me is putting a lot of time into somebody and then they say they quit, period, or say you invest in a person and you get them right to where it's like, yeah, you can be a part of my team, we can be a team now, and then they go somewhere else and that other place benefits, and you're sitting there like, oh, I got to start all over? Well, F you, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, the funny thing about interning is there's this expectation of getting ahead, and at some point, you're just a stepping stone for your intern, and that's to be expected. That's the other problem with it. You spend all this time training someone, and they're going to take the first opportunity they can when they're ready, and should. Can't really blame them.
Yeah, that's why it's better to spend time on the guys that really have a lot together, because if you're training somebody that you think has a good attitude, yet there's two other guys that you kind of feel like would cut your throat in an alley, sometimes it's better to give those guys the shot because they'll get it done, and you can rely on that. And later on, when they leave, there'll be another guy who comes in, you know, that's aggressive and assertive and has, you know, anticipates the needs of the client and the needs of the engineer or whoever they're assisting. You know.
That's the other thing about interns is the just because I want you aggressive doesn't mean I want you to be intense. So there's personality. You know, I got to have someone in the room that isn't making me tense. And you know, it's different people are going to make me tense than they're going to make you or anybody else tense. We all have, you know, it's chemistry. So there's got to be chemistry there too.
I think that I probably should have used the word assertive over aggressive.
Well, I've been using aggressive too. I mean, I know what you're saying, but I just wanted to point that out. That, like, I've had intense people come into my workspace, and it's really difficult for me to operate like that. So you got to know who makes you. You got to work with the people that put you in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, intensity's not so bad if it's a creative energy.
Yeah, it's an energy for sure. The energies have to match.
I was talking to God, I hate putting people on blast if they're not here. So I'll just say it like this. You spoke about the labels and they'll have their 5 guys, and when I talk to people seem to really believe that the 5 mixers right now are the only people who can really deliver. And I keep saying, if you take your top 5 guys, mastering, whatever, and they die today, music still goes on, top level stuff will still go on. Like Mick Guzowski, he was not in the limelight for the longest, and next thing you know, boom, he's there and he's slaying, and the dude was there the whole time. But because he wasn't one of the top called on guys at that time, you know, if you would have went to work with him, people would have been like, no, he's back in the 70s, but he's slaying. The dude's been skillful the whole time.
He's been mixing a long time. He mixed Chuck Mangione's hit album from the late 70s.
That's going back a ways.
Yeah, that guy, he's had one hell of a career.
I was listening to a mix that he has for UAD, this thing he has going on, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this dude is slaying without the budget of Pharrell and all that stuff that was going on. I'm like, this is dope. And so, like I said, if the 5 top dudes or 10 disappear, like for me, there's no fear as far as the quality that can still be put out, because there's a whole bunch of guys out there who are really good who are not in the limelight. But some people act like the top 5 are the only guys.
I don't even know who the top 5 are anymore, to be honest. I think that most of the top 5 guys are teaching master classes and mixing Vanity albums right now. I think that that's how they are maintaining their way of life that has been ripped from all of us 10 years ago or 8 years ago. And I'll say this: there are a shitload of guys that are that have really good discographies that can mix for reasonable prices, possibly less than just going into the local studio. I have my own mix suite, so if you hire me to mix, you're just paying me to mix. You're not paying for a room too. You go into a room that's $50 an hour, that's $500. And if it takes 2 days, it's $1,000. So there are a lot of guys that have made a lot of records that are available as producers and engineers, and everybody looks at them and says, "Oh, I can't afford them. They're too big." They're taking whatever they can find that they like at this point.
Everybody's affordable these days.
Exactly, and everybody's in the same boat. So, the new kid is competing with the old dude, and that's just craziness. But that's the way it is at the moment.
And Dave 4 is asking, why aren't they in the limelight, though? The guys who are not in the top 5 who are actually great.
Well, what's a hit? Because what's a hit song anymore? I mean, where's the hits? It's all a lot of the producer songwriter stuff is mixed by producers. I probably what's his name? Spike. He's probably in the top 5 right now. I don't even know. I don't even think, I probably shouldn't be naming people out, but it used to be you always knew what everybody got paid. And now nobody knows what anybody's getting paid. And it used to be you could actually set a price and not worry about it. And now there's no such thing as a set price. There's like, okay, you send me the material, I'm going to check it out, and you tell me what the price is, and I'll tell you whether I can do it. As long as the price is within some kind of range that I'm gonna touch something. And so a lot of times people go, oh, well, I only have. I'll throw out real numbers. Let's just say someone has $10,000 to produce an album, and that's really not enough to produce an album for this particular group, for whatever reason, okay? Well, there's many ways to cut costs without necessarily cutting quality. We're doing it all the time these days. And I might say, listen, why are you making an album? Okay, $10K isn't enough for us to do your album. It is enough for us to do 5 songs, though, 6 songs. So why don't you do 2 EPs? Because first of all, what the fuck is an album going to do for you? You put out an album of 10 songs, people only listen to 1 song off an album a lot of times.
It's all singles now.
It's all singles now. So why are you not putting out EPs? If someone recorded an album, I suggest to them that they put out 3 EPs. There are exceptions to that. If they're the kind of artist that's going to sell a physical product, then an album makes sense. If they're the kind of artist that's only going to sell physical product when they play out, then it makes more sense to do EPs. And the reason is because you always have new product to sell. And you can just as easily charge $10 for your 3-song EP as you can for your 10-song album. But you can't charge $20 for your 10-song album, so why not put out EPs? So I would recommend at that point, okay, you don't have enough budget for what you thought you wanted to do, but maybe that's not the best plan anyway. Maybe the best plan is for you to do 6 songs, put out 2 EPs over the course of the year, you'll make twice the profit on what you sell, you're constantly putting out new product. It allows you to not blow your budget by doing, to not have to go and Kickstarter up another 10K or whatever to do the 10 songs, whatever. You can gain more fans. Maybe your Kickstarter campaign is better served a year from now after you put out your 2 EPs. Gives you time to build. So, you know, there's lots of ways to make a budget work. You know, if someone else was who's not a mixer producer, right, was to go and bid on the same job, well, he's got to use some of that budget to hire a mixer or a studio or whatever. So all of a sudden now I'm in a little bit of an advantage on that particular job because I can fold in the mixing as part of the entire price and not have to pay it out to somebody else. Yes, I've just increased my workload, but I'm going to do it anyway. So what does it matter? So when it comes to budgets and money and whatever, there's really no such thing as a set price. What there is, do we have enough money to do what it is that you want to do? And if we don't, what can we do to adjust your expectations rather than to adjust the money? Because we may not be able to adjust the money, but we can adjust your expectations. And you know, if you're particularly good at selling, or if you really, you know, been doing this a while and what you're saying makes sense, then you can guide people to go there and you can get business that you might otherwise have to pass if you just had a set price.
Matt, I wish we'd had him in our mentors lab. That would have been fun.
Yeah, but like what I'm hearing on these audio books of his, to see him cussing people out, I would like that, even if he's cussing me out. I'm ex-military, so I'm used to it. But I actually enjoy the realism and just the straightforward stuff from him. But yeah, he'd be great for Mentors Lab.
I don't even know what it is.
We get industry professionals together, throw them in the studio with up-and-coming artists, artists and producers, and create songs from scratch.
Oh, right. That's cool.
Like they will come in and write songs from scratch.
It's like a writing fest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like if they're writing and you could actually have conversation with them about the crap that they're writing to get them to understand what they're, you know, from jump. Look, you're say every verse starts on the 1, or the verse, the chorus, the bridge, it all starts on the 1. What is this? Like things like that, like where we could have the input from jump be affected by you guys, and then everybody learns from doing an action instead of just sitting on panels talking.
Yeah, right. Well, that's pretty cool. I tell you, you know, I took songwriting at Berklee College of Music. I went there for a couple of years, and
really?
Yeah, and my first year of college, I went to Rutgers and studied piano with Kenny Barron, who's, if you don't know him, he's an amazing jazz piano player, very well respected.
So you're a player too.
Well, I have copious amounts of rust at this point. I wouldn't attempt anything that's not MIDI. But let me put it this way. I quit Rutgers after studying with Kenny because I realized I was never going to be a player, really. I just didn't have I didn't want to sit in a room for 8 hours and play. It's just, you know, when I found the studio, I could be in the studio for 20 hours, you know, and still want to stay. But I didn't want to stay in front of the piano for 8 hours. So I was like, my mom had convinced me to go to Rutgers because I would get an education. I didn't need an education. I was going to music. So I decided I was going to go to Berklee. And at Berklee, one semester I took vocals as my major, just because I wanted to get some lessons for singing. And the teacher was horrified. I was terrible. You know, I wasn't actually like thinking I was going to be a singer. And I did my test, and you could just see the panel was just like, they were just horrified. It was hilarious. Anyway, so then I settled finally on songwriting, and I took that. I stayed with that for 4 semesters. And we would take songs. Pat Pattison was one of the teachers. He's a well-known lyricist. And John Aldrich. And we would take songs and we would break them down. We'd tear them apart. And we'd figure out, okay, the chord structure. We'd figure out the melodic structure. We'd figure out how the melody accelerates in the B section. and you start to see certain things, that certain patterns that occur in great songs. They push the listener forward, and that you do that by how you structure your rhymes. If you have an E rhyme in the verse, if you look at Billy Joel songs, he'll put an E, 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 E throughout the verse, and then it's an O in the chorus. He never puts an E in the chorus. And that is by design, because it separates it. Like when you put your highest notes on a song are often in the chorus, because they have the most energy, and because that's the lift. And so we go up to a higher melody note in the chorus because it's effective. And so we broke down songs and looked at all of these things throughout that time as to what makes effective songs. Well, that helped me with producing more than any other thing. And this whole idea of getting producers in a room and having people write and having them understand and break down what's going on and what offer suggestions that instantly improve the song and why that suggestion would work or whatever are all extremely valuable things, both for someone who wants to learn how to be a songwriter and who wants to be a producer, both.
Well, all right. Now, you said melody accelerates. Would you explain that, please? Like you said, how the melody would accelerate?
So, I'll try and think of a song. So the verse, you might have four lines with two rhymes, right? One, the first word that rhyme, two and four of those four lines have rhymes, right?
Okay.
Then, in the B section, you might accelerate the rate of the melody. So if it was going da 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 da, and then in the B section, da 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 da, like that, it's accelerating the rhythm of the melody, and then the rhymes are happening more frequently. Well, that has the effect of pushing everything forward and hurling you into the chorus. It's a technique, and I'm not saying that probably 90% of the great writers don't think like that. It's just a natural inclination. But and even as a writer, as a songwriter, I was songwriting when I was taking these courses. They weren't teaching me how to write a song. They were helping me to define the things that are working in my songs and in other songs. And by defining it, I understood it and could recognize it. And as a songwriter, you might want to throw all that out, because that's not necessarily useful stuff, especially if you can do it innately. But as a producer, when there's a problem, if you can define it,
you can fix it.
You can point it out and you can fix it. And so that's where the power of that comes. And that's what I mean by accelerating a rhyme structure or accelerating a melodic structure. And a lot of times the rhythmic structure accelerates in the B section too. And then you got everything operating in all cylinders, pushing someone forward to the chorus. And the chorus doesn't even need to go on higher notes. The chorus could go on lower notes, as long as there's contrast and as long as that provides a lift. You know, there's no rules, and you got to understand when to break the rules. But there are guidelines, and there are things that are tried and true that absolutely work. Actually, not guidelines, we call them tools. They're tools. And the more tools that you use out of the toolbox in your writing, the more effective your song is going to be.
Okay, we need Zen in the art of songwriting.
Actually, that's not a bad idea, actually.
Because when I... Go ahead.
The only problem with that, I'll tell you the big problem with that, what sucks about it, and fucking Spotify can play the song and pay nobody, but if I tried to write a book where I'm breaking down songs, I'd have to pay to do the songs because they're protected by copyright. It's just nuts.
Which is just totally idiotic.
The logistics of writing that book, yeah, you'd have to be paying you'd have to be having download deals with Harry Fox and shit. It'd be a very expensive venture, I think.
Or spend hours getting the rights to use them. You know, you'd spend weeks just trying to get one song cleared.
Yeah. Asking
Then,
people if you can break down their songs, and maybe. But that's the big problem with that book, because I've thought
okay,
about it before.
how about an audio thing like the Billionaire, where you go through and get an artist, a songwriter, to do the changes that are necessary for the song? I mean, that would be entertaining. Um,
The
like
thing
on the
about a hit
Billionaire.
song that's recognizable is there's no arguing that the song's effective.
Okay.
You may hate it, but there's no arguing the song's effective. If it's an unknown song, there's a debate to be had. So that's why it's got to be known songs.
Okay.
So it would be impossible to do that without having to pay the royalties,
It's
unless you
become
got people to clear it, or unless you did it under some kind of education. If it's for education, you could do it, but you'd have to be part of. I don't even think you could get away with that because it's for profit.
we've had this whole thing of what a producer is, like defining what a producer is, but as I work with singers, songwriters, it's clear to me they don't understand what songwriting is. They don't understand the craft. I mean, they're not even, a lot of them are not even doing this innately. They're just, it's sort of like they took an English class in high school and college or whatever, and maybe they can write some good sentences, but as far as writing a song, no clue. And it's very obvious when they start singing or.
In 1985, if you wanted to write songs, you had to go buy and record them or whatever. You had to go buy a synthesizer. You had to buy a 4-track machine or whatever you're using. You had to buy the MIDI system, whatever. Now, it's already in your computer. You know what I mean? So everybody and anybody can try and do this, which is fine. Except, we got to be able to weed out people who are going to rise to the cream. And because there's so many more instances of people who are just starting out and who have no clue, there's going to be more instances of you running into them. You know what I'm saying? And if you wanted to go and record your song for real, you had to go to a studio, and now you don't have to do that. You can record it at home. It may not come out very great, but how is that different from my first recordings? They didn't come out very great. So, and then people realize, well, I do need a professional, I need help, and so they go to someone who may only be a little more experienced than them, or they may go to you, or they may go to me. If they go to me, I'm going to tell them you're way too early. See me in a few years, whatever. But this is going to happen. This is just the way it is. The more people that have access to recording, the more people that are going to record.
You've explained how songwriting helps you as a producer. What other stuff has helped you as a producer, and then what is producing?
Sometimes I think back about everything that I've learned over the past. I keep saying 86. That's when I went to college. So 86. I got into Dimension Sound Studios in 87. That's really when I started learning how to really record in a proper studio. So that's 30 years. And sometimes I look back and I just shake my head at how much I fucking know just from experience of doing it. And like it's like going to class for 30 fucking years, literally. And I'm still learning, and I still become better and smarter and all of it, every single thing, whether it's the mix, whether it's recording, whether it's whether it's assisting, whether it was anything and everything, whether it's playing on a project, anything and everything goes into the knowledge base that is producing. And it's not just the musical stuff. I mean, you got to learn the musical stuff too. It's also the people skills, and it's also bringing the people to where it is they need to go for their project. And that isn't a decision that I make for them. That's an observation. Okay, I am constantly evaluating and thinking about what's going on in this person's head and how that translates to the music. Because ultimately, the music's a reflection of them, and I view it as that. And it's, to me, it's critical that that reflection is accurate, because that's how they're going to be happy and that's how they're going to perform the best. I'll bring it back to VJ again. I mean, VJ will tell you straight up he has Lyme disease, and he has cognitive issues because of the Lyme disease, and as a result, he's kind of crazy. Crazy in a good way. I love the guy to death, but he's kind of crazy. So we put that into his music. I put that aspect of his personality and who he is as a person into his music. It was important to me that that goes into the music because I think it's important to him, whether he knows it or not. And so when I started working with him, I was constantly evaluating who this person was. You know, super talented individual, that I knew right away, but like, what is it about this guy that makes him tick? That made these songs come from him, first of all, and how is it that we're going to present this in a way that's best for the songs and for him as an artist and who he is as a person. So all of that shit that I just laid out took 30 years of just doing it to learn. I can't even tell you the aha moment of when I realized, you know, tying into the person's personality, into the music, whatever, because that probably came naturally most of the time. But you start to realize that it all is tied in. And as far as what producing is, it really depends on the record. Every record's different. But it's really about manifestation, and it's manifestation of the product, and it's manifestation of the product, and it's leadership, and it's getting everybody on board with the product, and getting everybody understanding the concept, and getting everybody to work towards the goal, which is a completed album, or song, or record, or whatever, in a way that best serves everybody, the artist and the songwriter, the band, everybody, with the primary concern being the song and the artist. And it's really just about kind of not just recording, you're in charge of the recording, but you're in charge of getting the recording done. And if it's mayhem, then the recording doesn't get done. If there's not organization, the recording doesn't get done, or it gets done for way over budget. If there's not someone who's in charge who can say, that's a good take, or no, you can do that better, let's try it again, then the option is to go in and listen every time you do a take and see if it's any good or not. And that's very time consuming. And so you got to have someone. You don't have to, but it's best if there's someone there who's in charge of the product and in charge of everything that goes into the making of that product, because then everybody else can concentrate on the jobs that they need to do. The singer can concentrate on singing. The artist can concentrate on being an artist. The songwriter is the songwriter. And you can actually finish a product that way. I don't know how everybody thinks they're a producer now. I met two wonderful girls. They were probably 18. They might have been younger. Their mother was at the party with them at NRG. and they introduced themselves to me, and they introduced themselves as producers. I'm like, and I was with CJ Vanston, and he and I look at each other, and I'm like, well, what have you produced? And they're like, oh, ourselves. Right, okay, of course, you produced yourselves. That makes you a producer. And I realized then that's when the term producer got so corrupted. First of all, there's no money in producing anymore, so why do you want to be a producer? And second of all, you're the artist. You're not the producer. You need a producer. Okay, so you're recording yourself, you're making your demos, that's great, but you're not a producer. So it has changed. I say in the book, everybody and the brother's a producer these days. They call themselves producers. Everybody calls themselves DJ producer in the book. And because the term's gotten so bastardized. But I guess at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is you're responsible for the product. And you're responsible for getting the product out on budget and on time. And sometimes you don't make the on budget and sometimes you don't make the on time, but at least you're trying. And at least you have a shot. Did that explain it adequately?
Good enough, bruh. And you're getting a thumbs up over there from John. You had mentioned the Lewitt LCT 940 microphone. Why do you like that microphone?
Oh, I love that entire Lewitt line. Are you kidding me? That line for the money? I don't know. If I had a studio, the drum line is great. It doesn't even cost that much. It's like $1,200 for the drum kit, which doesn't include 2 LDCs, which you kind of need. But those mics are really great, especially for the price. And even regardless of the price, they're great. And the LCT 940 is their highest end. I should say it's their most expensive large diaphragm condenser, but all of them are good. The 640. I was introduced to them when I was doing the Daily Adventures of Mixerman audiobook. I went over to Julian Benetta's house. He's a producer and a songwriter, and he had the whole line, and he was on the 640, and he sounded fucking great. And I was like, what are these microphones? And so I picked up a bunch of them, and I can't say good enough things about them. For some reason, like, I don't know what it is, but people know about them, but it's not like people don't know about them really. It's like, it's not like Shure or Sennheiser or any of the, or Neumann or any of the big ones that have been around forever, of course. But given the quality of those microphones and how good they are, I'm just shocked that everybody and their brother isn't just buying them up. It's just, it's crazy to me because there's a lot of microphones that are in the same price range that don't even come close to comparing to what you get from those Lewitts.
I've never heard of them. What are they priced at?
They're priced great. Like the drum kit gives you a kick drum mic, and the kick drum mic has a condenser and a dynamic in it. It's got both, and you can adjust. You have switches between to how much of you can do one, both, or one, the other, or both. And so that kit comes with a kick drum mic, the snare drum mic, which is great. It's the only snare drum mic I've ever used that wasn't a 57 that's worth a damn. And I've used fucking everything, man. On snare, are you kidding me? I always go back to the 57 until I got this Lewitt. For a while, I was using the Sony C33P or something like that, and that got old after a little bit. So then, so you get a kick drum mic, a snare drum mic. You get 3 tom mics, which clip on to the toms, which is really handy. And they're small, low profile, so they don't, not in the way of the drummer's toms. And then 2 SDCs. I think there's 7 mics in the kit, and it's $1,200. I mean, it's a ridiculous deal. So I've seen them down to $1,000 even when they go on sale. Like, that kit is a no-brainer. You buy that kit, you will use those mics. No-brainer. $1,000, you've got 5 mics. Is it 5 or is it 7? 7 mics. You got 7 mics. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 mics.
Look, Dave
No,
Ford
I
just posted
better
it
than that.
over there. Eric Riker and Bob Horn are. They also vouched for that. They were swearing by the Lewitt brand.
Oh, at Echo Bar, yeah. Yeah, Echo Bar uses the Lewitts too over there, sure.
Was that you, John, that I overstepped accidentally? No. Okay. I had another quick. Oh, what radio shows do you have?
I haven't done one in a while. Everybody's moved, man. I moved to Asheville. Slippy moved to Australia. Doer's all over. Not Doer, sorry. Aardvark is all over the place. So it's just the Big Blue's not there, and well, Big Blue North, but Big Blue in Jersey City's not there. So I don't see Saint anymore. I don't see anybody anymore. So, but I'm thinking about doing a podcast again. I'm gonna put something together here. Made a bunch of friends in Asheville. Asheville's a really great place. It's been a really good place for me. There's a lot of musicians here. There's a lot of action going on here.
North Carolina?
Yeah, there's a lot of energy. It's a small town. There's 80,000 people here, but you know, the studio has a studio house. I can bring a band here or an artist here and set them up, and the studio is reasonably priced, but it's state of the art. I've got every amp you can think of in there. I've got vintage guitars in there. They've got all the keyboards that I would ever need in there. They got everything I need. It's got an 8068, which is my favorite console in the church. The church sounds amazing. There's an API room in the other, which is my second favorite console. To me, you know, I can put together a whole package this way. In LA, it's difficult. I gotta like piecemeal studios and stuff, and I gotta put people up in my house, and it's just like, so it's a much better situation for me here now at this point, at this stage. And the view is magnificent. It's not the beach, but the mountains are nice too.
Now, The Far Side. What's another song that is bringing you people to this day? You said you might do a song and 10, 15 years later, people are still coming to you, bringing you business because of that song. What's another song or two that have that effect, where they're bringing you business?
Oh, I still get lots of work because of my stuff, the albums I did with Ben Harper, and it could be just about anything, but really, for the most of the stuff that comes from the legacy work is Ben Harper and The Far Side.
And are they wanting that exact thing, or
no one ever wants that. In fact, the funny thing is, you know, people. I've had people more than a few people blow a sigh of relief after starting to work with me because they realized I wasn't going to try and make them sound like that record. I mean, just because someone likes a record doesn't. I mean, the people that hire me because of the Far Side record are a lot of times they're rockers. So, like, they don't want to sound like the Far Side. We know that going in. They just love that record. That's all. It's crazy, man. I don't know. I can't explain it.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say a whole bunch of hip hop dudes, because I remember when that came out.
I never got any hip hop records because of the. I never got a single hip hop record. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I did get a bunch of hip hop records early days from the Far Side, but that was because I was in the circles and I was talking them up, and we were all, you know, we were kind of, everybody knew everybody else. So that was different. But nowadays, I wouldn't get a hip hop gig because of the Far Side. I mean, if you listen, I mean, hip hop has changed so dramatically, production-wise. Anyway, you know, the song that I did for the book for Billionheir is called the Douchebag Song. I got Fat Lip and Slim Kid Trey to do the rhymes on that track, and who are from the Far Side, originally from the Far Side. They're split up now, and so I asked them to do the rhymes, and they agreed, and I just lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that?
You were just talking about those were the hip-hop guys that you got working with you on the Billionaire, and you didn't actually get a bunch of hip-hop songs because
Oh,
of
right. Well, I remember where I was going with that. So, but that song, because I knew I was getting those guys to do it, I did that song in a retro, style. I did it 90s style hip hop, And, I mean, which is actually, when you think about it, and I have, that's kind of risky because as someone who hasn't produced or done any hip hop in so long of any note, it can date me. But really, the whole purpose of it was not to actually get back into producing hip hop, but I wanted kind of a retro kind of track out of it. And anytime I play it for someone who's into hip hop, they usually say, "Oh, 90s style," and so I accomplished the goal there.
Okay. Dave, he posted over here. Let's see. Let me read this for you. It says, anybody want to talk about the next Netflix model for music where they're putting playlists together to make money?
I have a friend here who's doing something similar to that, who's basically full service. They they set up the restaurants with a system, and then they set them up with their music too, and they put together all the music. Okay, so they tell them the style, the genre, and I said to them, well, why don't they just play Pandora and select a radio station, because those work pretty good, but apparently, they don't want to do that. They want someone setting all that stuff up for them. So there is going to be opportunities in that of packaging music like that for businesses that want to play music and want to have some control over it. The problem with the Pandora radio station is a song could come on that's inappropriate. And I guess if you have someone putting together the package for you, you can make sure that there's no inappropriate songs in there based on whatever your business is. If you're a restaurant that services kids, you don't want to have expletive language necessarily coming out of your speakers in your restaurant. It's going to upset the parents and stuff. So for purposes of control, that seems to make a little sense. Beyond that, I haven't really given any of that concept a whole lot of thought. I'm getting into selling music, but at the end of the day, that's not really where I'm going to end up being. I'm going to finish out my career on the creative side more than the selling side.
And Dave just posted, Spotify is becoming a label. Netflix original movies, Spotify original albums without the major label.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, yeah, whatever. They've got the distribution channel, right? So I'd like to see that contract.
All right.
How much do I get paid if I'm a Spotify artist?
Yeah, you go broke.
0.
Okay, do any of you guys have any more questions for Eric?
Nah, this has been great though. Love it.
And Eric, is there anything that's close to your heart or something you want to curse somebody out about?
No, I think I'm about talked out, man. It's been a very good conversation. It's felt a little one-sided at times.
Bruh, what it really comes down to is content, and you were going and giving the content.
I really appreciate all the questions, by the way, from all you guys, and Deanna as well, lady, and this is a pretty cool format. I really dig it. It's good.
So it wasn't painful?
No, I didn't think it was gonna be. It's more painful to try and set up your own fucking hangout, but joining in is pretty easy. Just click the button.
Yeah, I'm still not comfortable doing these. The whole thing is totally foreign to me.
Who said that?
John over here.
Oh, but I have a stock, the photo that comes with the frame.
Like Bill Kamek and I, we do stuff in the background, like when stuff is going on. If you notice, our pictures disappear, but we're very proactive. We try to make it to where it's easy for you guys as we do this, and where you just don't have to deal with garbage. So even if you're going to do a hangout, Eric, and you want to administer it where you started or I started, however you want, just let either one of us know. Well, Bill will have to speak for himself, but you let me know, and I'll do whatever it is to help. There's stuff I can do in the background to help out. I don't know. Maybe Bill's a mean guy now. I don't know. What say you, Bill?
I can't even hear Bill.
I was muted up. Sorry about that. Yeah. No, we're always down. It's always good information for the community. We appreciate it, Eric. Thanks a lot for the time. This has been great.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to understand really how the whole business is working today and enjoy an enjoyable story as well, then go check out hashtag Mixerman, the Billionaire Parent. And of course, I'm on Mixermania as well on Facebook. So you can check that out too if you like. Join up.
Where is it being sold at? Is it Amazon?
Amazon, your favorite retailer. And the audiobook is on Audible, of course, and it'll probably stay on Audible. The Daily Adventures of Mixerman, if anybody wants to get that audiobook, you don't have to join Audible to get that one. I'm not exclusive with Audible with that anymore, and you can actually buy that directly from my website. It's I'm selling it for $10, which is Audible sells them for $25, which I think is outrageous. And I have no control over the pricing on Audible or on iTunes on any of that stuff, which is total fucking bullshit. Talk about rant. I could rant for a long time about that. They say, "Oh, we can't let you change the price because we are having a problem with price fixing." What the fuck is that?
They're fixing the price.
Exactly. Anyway, everything's all fucked up right now. I mean, even the Department of Justice, this whole thing with the publishing that they're doing is so fucked up. It's unbelievable. And everybody is going crazy. The publishing industry is going nuts saying, "Are you fucking kidding me? We've been coming to you telling you that we need this changes, A, B, C, and D as soon as possible. And you fucking throw in F? And it's not anything that any of us want. And you say that it's because of antitrust issues that are non-existent and have been non-existent for 100 fucking years, and you're going to make this change and completely fuck our industry? It's just mind-boggling what's going on with music right now.
What
and
that tells
I don't
me
know what's going to happen.
What that tells me is there's a lot of big money behind it.
There
there's a
is,
lot of
but the DOJ is not supposed to be tainted by that.
But we know the story behind all of that.
They're not supposed. The DOJ is supposed to be its own. They're not supposed to even be political influence on the DOJ. And okay, maybe there's some political influence, but to the point of completely usurping the way things are supposed to be and the way things are set up in this business, without any rhyme or reason, without an end game, without a reason, other than you feel now all of a sudden, after 100 years, it's antitrust issue. And I know that most of the people listening to this have no fucking clue what it is, and I can't even tell you that I do, other than this idea that if two people wrote a song, then one person can make the decision about whether they authorize sync rights to it. Well, what is that going to do other than pit the two people that wrote the song against each other for accepting monies and accepting opportunities? It's just really, really, really bad.
It's funny because I've talked about this in a couple of different group, hangouts and meetings. I even talked about it at the Mentors Lab, and pretty much the few times that I mentioned it, I just got blank looks, and I thought, if people don't get out and read and start studying this, they have nobody to blame but themselves.
That's the problem, John. Nobody can understand it because there's nothing to grasp hold of. So nobody understands how anybody gets paid, because most people aren't getting paid anyway. And if you're not getting paid, then how are you going to know where the money trail is? I lost you.
They don't really want you to know where the money trail is, I think.
And they're doing a fucking spectacular job of it, because I can't follow it. I don't know that anybody can, really. Anyway.
Good hang, Eric. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mott. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. This was a good one. There's plenty of information in this, and in case you didn't know what some of us do, somebody hipped me to this. They had a long road trip, and they turned the YouTube into MP3, and they would use it to ride on their 8-hour ride. This is what they would listen to, and some people are playing these things in their studios instead of TV. They play this type of stuff in the studio. Cool. So this was a good hang, good information. I particularly was drawn in even more when you started talking about the songwriting. I'm on that right now, so that just really grabbed me. But I appreciate it, Eric.
We're all songwriters now, Mott.
I know, right? Good times. Thanks a lot, Eric.
All right, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Wonderful.
Take care. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. All right.
Signing off.
All right, bye, guys.